Well, a very good evening and welcome to African Perspective with me, Aldrin St-Pierre. We've just heard there from the President saying that the country is now moving in slowly to level 3 of the lockdown. We'll be breaking down what this means for you. We'll be speaking to various political parties with regards to that and just looking through the list of items that will be allowed during level 3. That's what we'll be going through. We'll also be speaking to economists as well as speaking to a political analyst what the implications of this does mean. Actually, one of the expectations was whether there will be an announcement around the reopening of schooling. Remember that has been an ongoing debate, and depending on which sector you are in or which part of the country you are in, that debate continues to go on, and some people are saying that children should be allowed back to school. Others are arguing not now. Musimamani, for instance, is also arguing that not at the moment. Their movement, SA Now movement, is saying that what the country should do is wait at least until August, citing some evidence that they have been receiving. So we will be speaking to Musimamani with regards to that. And of course, as I've indicated, the various other political parties with what they have to say about this announcement from the President. We'd also love to hear from you. So what you can do is tweet hashtag African Perspective of what you make about the announcement that has been given by the President. So let's just quickly go through what COVID-19 level 3 means for you as a South African, various levels that there are, 5 levels. So you have level 5, level 4, which we are currently in at the moment. And then, of course, you also have from level 5 all the way to level 1. Most of us are actually looking forward to an announcement around level 1 where we go back to normal. So here it is, looking at what will be allowed in level 3. So as it stands at the moment, starting off here with manufacturing. In the manufacturing sector, what will be allowed is stationary production scaling up to 100%, cement and other construction materials scaling up to 100% employment as well. You've got steel and other metal manufacturing scaling up to phases to 100%, clothing, textile, as well as other chemicals. When it comes to the construction and related services, the commercial building projects will now be allowed. This is at the end of May. As the President has indicated, we don't have a date that has been set as yet, but the President did say, of course, that they will be allowing for submissions and there would be some amendments that we can expect to this particular list. Going on, looking at retailers and what retailers will be allowed to sell, you have hardware components and the supplies of sale to the general public, stationery of all books, all household appliances, all clothing, home textiles and footwear. You have the motor vehicle sales, and this is, of course, subject to directions. Then there is off-premises consumption of alcohol. Many people probably looking forward to this particular one. So this is subjected to limited hours between Monday to Wednesday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And again, as I've indicated, that the President did say, as they allow submissions to come in, some of these lists that we have here could be amended, and also the indication there of no consumption on premises of the places where you will be buying the alcohol from. In the information and communication services, 3 postal services, courier services will be allowed, as well as related transport for retail goods, and subject to the direction as we will be receiving after Cabinet has met and all the submissions have been received, the NCCC as well. Information on communications as well, postal services, as I've indicated, will be allowed. Media and entertainment, all those services that have currently been allowed under level 4. Online services will continue. Production of local broadcasts will continue. And then financial and business services, we will have commercial real estate and permitted. So let's speak to John Steenhuisen, who is the leader of the Democratic Alliance. John, good evening and welcome to the African Perspective. Looking into what the President has announced, is this something that you welcome as the leader of the DA? Hi, John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, but there's somebody else on the line.
Okay, apologies for that, but just quickly answer that particular question. Your reaction as the Democratic Alliance to this announcement by the President. You have said before that at the start of the announcement of the various levels that the announcement should have been at level 3. So now we're heading to that level 3. Hi, John, you can go ahead.
Well, there's people talking over me. I can't hear a word you're saying.
Okay, let me start again. Reaction from the Democratic Alliance with what the president has announced just a while ago.
Well, what did the president announce? It's very, very difficult to work out what was announced. I mean, are we moving to level 3.9? When is it going to happen? They've had an NCC meeting and a cabinet meeting this week, and we have no idea about what is going to be the next move. And I think this is really, really concerning for South Africans. It looks like we're going to remain in level 4 lockdown till the end of May, and continue to cause the huge harm to the economy that's been in place over the course of the last while, and going to put even more people's future in jeopardy. I certainly think we were expecting a bit more of a bolder outline from the president about a certainty on the way forward, and I don't think we received that this evening.
What bolder outline would you have liked to see, considering that the president did say that during this period they will allow for submissions, which could mean alterations to the list that we currently have under level 3?
Well, I didn't hear him say that he was going to change anything that's currently in place under level 4. Level 3, we're looking at the end of May. That's, certainly another 2.5 weeks away of hard lockdown that remains. As we've already pointed out, the efficacy of the hard lockdown ended around about 2 weeks ago, and that's certainly what the president's own epidemiologists have said, that we now need to start to open up the economy more. And the longer we keep the economy in this hard lockdown, the more livelihoods we place at greater risk. So people made submissions on the level 4. They weren't listened to. No doubt there's going to be submissions made on level 3. And it's very difficult to comment until we see what those regulations that they finally decide on are. But I am glad the president has admitted that a lot of the regulations that have been put in place to date have been a mistake and have been ill-conceived. But there's no use admitting the mistake. You need to repeal it. He should have immediately announced that he was going to withdraw the ridiculous clothing announcement made yesterday by Minister Ibrahim Patel. He should be immediately announcing an opening up of e-commerce. He should be immediately allowing businesses that are able to practice all those things he spoke about tonight, PPE, screening of employees, and social distancing, that are able to open safely, to do so. And I think he's missed a huge opportunity this evening to be able to read the mood of the nation and to adapt accordingly.
Okay, just a quick one before I let you go. The announcement also there by the president in terms of the targeted approach. Epidemiologists have also said that you can't just go wholesale into a community without looking at the hotspots. And Professor Muddy, who serves on the Minister's Advisory Council, saying that the approach that should be used is what we're currently seeing in the Western Cape.
Yes, that's correct. And what the Western Cape's been doing is exactly what Professor Karim said to them to do, to go out and look for the virus, deal with the small bushfires before you have to deal with raging infernos. And so the Western Cape testing, tracing and tracking capability certainly outstrips anything else in the country. And they're doing that because if you're able to deal with the community infections and find the virus where it is and then isolate, you're able to deal with it. But the problem is at a nationwide level, we're not testing nearly enough. I mean, the president spoke tonight about the UK and the USA, that their population's a lot bigger than us. We haven't even hit 400,000 tests in this country. So it's very difficult to start making comparisons when you have absolutely no idea just how deep and wide the virus is. The other point to make is that hard lockdown does not stop the spread of the virus. Many of the infections that we're seeing now under level 4 were contracted under level 5. There's a 2-week window period. So we're in day 12, I think, of level 4. And you're seeing the cases rising. And that is the important thing to note, that our spike is still coming. Those countries that you referred to have had their spikes. Our spike is still coming later this year.
Your Premier, Alan Winde, in self-isolation, how is he doing?
Well, I haven't spoken to him, but he's in self-isolation because, unfortunately, we had the sad news of the loss of cameraman Lungile Tom, and I extend my condolences on behalf of the DA to his family and friends. But he attended a press conference that Alan Winde hosted, and so all those people who were at the press conference have now had to go into self-isolation, and obviously he will subject himself to a test in the window period.
Okay, thank you so much. John Steenhuisen there, the leader
so
of the
much.
Democratic Alliance. Let's now move over and speak to the spokesperson of the governing party, the ANC. We're now joined by Pule Mabe. Pule, good evening and welcome to African Perspective. From the ANC's point of view, and just listening into what the Democratic Alliance is saying, they're saying that there were not enough details in terms of this particular announcement, that the president should have been much clearer.
Thanks, Aldrin, and evening to the viewers. The president he did declare that opening the economy abruptly could also serve to compromise the good work that has already been done out there. They indicated even earlier that they've got to make sure that in easing the lockdowns, they also look at the progress that is being made on the ground.
Hi, Pule, can you hear me?
Aldrin? Yes, I can hear you. I was just making a point that the president had emphasized that you can't just ease the lockdowns. He had taken his time, taking the nation in his own confidence, outline the progress that has been recorded, the work done by the frontline workers, our nurses out there, whom we salute in the African National Congress, showing that we have also increased the capacity to screen and test those that might have contracted with the virus.
Okay.
I mean, we were initially at 4,000. We are there. They said they are now testing between 10,000 and 15,000. It shows progress.
Okay, so the president also saying that this is, of course, the first time that we're experiencing this, and this is now all of us, and of course there will be mistakes that are committed or mistakes that are being made. From the ANC's point of view, what are some of those mistakes?
Well, I would say all of this is a learning curve. We are dealing with a situation such as this for the first time. We really sympathize with all partners and those deployed in government to do this work. It's a learning curve, and we hope that as they move forward, they will be able to adjust all of the measures that are being taken to also take South Africa, to also take the concerns or issues that are raised by South Africans into account. What is critical is that the broad consultative that is taking place here.
Okay, Pule, let's just quickly see whether we can try and dial you back and get you on the telephone line instead, because with that Skype line there is crackling. I think very important to this particular conversation is around the mistakes that have been committed, and which were some of those mistakes that the ANC can say that here it is where we think that we had dropped the ball, or we can say that the NCCC has dropped the ball, or Cabinet has dropped the ball. In the meantime, let's speak to the IFP spokesperson, Mkhuleka Hlengo, who joins us on the line. Good evening and welcome to African Perspective. From the IFP's point of view, what's your reaction to what the president has announced?
Well, good evening, Eldon, and to the viewers. Well, the president did not say anything new, really. Safe to say that it was an update in terms of where we were. And of course, he had not addressed the nation in close to 20 days. And so it was important for him to reassure the nation and take us into confidence in so far where things were. It's quite clear that the consultative process are indicating that we cannot be hurried and haphazard in the phasing out of the lockdown. And the mistakes that you speak about, of course, are of fundamental importance, but you should have spoken to which ones.
Yes.
Amongst those mistakes is the fact that cabinet ministers have been giving us mixed messages, as I said, but it should have been very clear in so far in which departments and ministries those mistakes have taken place to provide clarity. And it's going to be important for the president to rein the ministers in. This is not a beauty contest. It is not, a popularity contest in terms of which minister is gaining more airtime than the other. Here, what is important is consistency and certainty, and a particular discipline needs to be employed. And what we have seen over the past few weeks is of great concern. Obviously, we need to broaden the scope of the consultations. There is contradictions in the regulations which are adding to the confusion, and there seems to be an approach which says we'll make the rules and regulations as we go, and the shifting of goalposts is not going to tie us down to one strategic direction insofar as flattening that curve is concerned. So we'll wait for the end of May to actually hear something far more substantive, so that we know who we're going. But as far as the IFP is concerned, we cannot at this point in time really with certainty say that we can move to stage 3, but we do need to clarify the regulations of stage 4.
Yeah, you mentioned the issue around the consultative process and what's currently happening. What is the difference that the IFP would like to see, especially as an opposition party that is represented in Parliament?
Well, amongst other things is the regulations which DTI issued insofar as clothing is concerned, because you are adding a lot of confusion there, particularly during a period of a change of season. That kind of uncertainty is not going to help the economy, because shops and retailers are not going to know what to sell, what not to sell, who should be at work and who should not be at work. We still have not gotten clarity insofar as consumables are concerned, hot foods, cold foods, and so on. You've got people who are actually working and are relying on actually those prepared meals in order for them to actually sustain themselves during the day. Moreover, the issue of travel and movement between towns and cities and provinces for the purposes of work is not clear. But I think the fundamental issue which the president should have spoken about is the access to education during this time, and making sure that the provisions and resources and infrastructure for education are sorted out, because we do not know when schools will be opening. We believe it's premature to send children back to school, but at the same time we need to deploy the resources which students need, particularly also in your institutions of higher learning. And so the president would have been well served to actually have dealt with all those issues so that there is clarity. I think tonight may have been a missed opportunity insofar as clearing some of the uncertainties which have prevailed over the past few weeks because of ministers who really do not seem to have tied themselves down to a particular direction.
Considering the confusion that has been caused by Minister Ibrahim Patel and the regulations that he has published, now that the president has said that we move into level 3 towards the end of May, does that point not become moot? Because under level 3, we are told that all clothing, home textiles and footwear will be sold.
No, the president is very premature in speaking about stage 3. We cannot at this point in time, in the midst of escalation of the transmissions, you know, new hotspots, new epicenters of the virus, and of course, given the fact that there is still a lot of uncertainty. So it's premature to speak about level 3, and that is why we are saying level 4 needs to be clearly defined, and we need to actually pin it down to certainty in terms of what is required. So we don't believe that the president is in a position now to actually say what will happen in 2 weeks' time. Therefore, the regulations by Minister Patel need clarity. And the warning we're giving government is to say, don't be overbearing, don't be overstretching, so that your regulations have got credibility. It seems as if there's an excitement of experimenting which has prevailed in the regulation-making process, which is compromising the legitimacy of the process when at every material point it's called into question. So the regulations published by DTI do need to be overhauled and presented anew, having duly consulted, but also at the same time having cleared the uncertainties and the confusions and the ambiguities which actually underpin the regulations before us. So level 4 should, as far as we are concerned, remain post the end of May and begin having imaginations about level 3 maybe in your second week of June, because at that point you'll be in a far better position to understand and know where you are.
Okay, thank you so much. IFP's national spokesperson, In the meantime, move over to the United Democratic Movements, Bantu Holomisa. General Bantu Holomisa, good evening and welcome to African Perspective. From the UDM side, your reaction to what the president has announced?
We have noted a carefully worded statement by the President. But I'm afraid to those who are expecting that he might make major announcements or say we are moving towards stage 3, there's nothing new until end of May. Even then, you are not certain as to which areas would be targeted because the issue of consultation, it has not been spelled out as to which areas we will be consulting on. But we have taken note that there might be some areas which might be rewarded because the infection in those areas are deemed to be very low.
Yeah.
So that would be a reward. But on the other hand, he should have not talked about USA and other countries and try and make comparison with those countries because South Africans have done very well as compared to those. But if you look at the kind of rewards as compared to what USA and other countries are doing, those countries are literally opening up. They even talk about releasing people to go and play soccer, cricket, golf, and so on. So, but at the end of the day, we have to always think about the lives of the South Africans.
You calling it a reward, and just listening into what Mkhuleko Hlengo had to say earlier on from the IFP, he says that from the IFP's perspective, they don't even think that the country is ready to move into a level 3.
Well, I'm not going to contest their version, but I've always been in support of putting the lives of South Africans first, and that the government and their scientists should be given the opportunity to manage this. And I don't doubt the thinking of the president,
yes,
except to say that I would have expected him to say if those countries which are worse than us currently are being rewarded, they rewarded their people. He could have said from tomorrow some businesses will open and people will go and work.
Sure, and so on top of that is the issue around targeting various hotspots. So instead of having a unilateral standardized approach, now you have various areas which will have a targeted approach, as you spoke about earlier on. Do you know, as the UDM, as an opposition party at least, how this will work? Who decides which level a certain district will be moving into?
Well, the whole thing is in the hands of the government. Not one single opposition party have got a clue on which areas we will be going to. Let the government and their national consultative, what do you call it, NCC?
Yes.
Something command, swim in their own stew. So we don't want to get involved in that.
Okay, thank you so much, UDM leader there, Bantu Olomisa. And we go back to the spokesperson of the ANC, Pulema, who is now joining us on the phone line. Pule, the question that I asked you earlier on was that the president said that he does note that there will be some mistakes that will be made. And my question to you is, which mistakes are those that the ANC, at least from its perspective, has picked up on?
Well, evening, Aldrin, once more, and evening to your viewers. Broadly, without necessarily going into specifics, I think the spirit that the president was conveying out there is that an exercise or a big operation such as the one that the government is currently undertaking is one that is going to come with its own challenges. There's going to be a lot of teething problems, learning curves, and all of that. And we should all appreciate that in all of that, all of those processes that government is undertaking, from time to time, they come back and report to members of the public. They also create an opportunity for South Africans to be able to express their own views, so that whatever measures that are being undertaken by government are fully canvassed with the public. Of course, an exercise such as this also comes with a great deal of sacrifice.
Yeah.
What is important is for us to note that whatever government is doing, they are seeking to protect lives and ensure that when we ultimately return South Africa to full normality, we shall have dealt with all of the challenges that are obtaining on the ground. But also the president commended South Africans. He did say that when he went on his usual walk, he saw many South Africans having put on their masks. Mm-hmm. This was a display of South Africans affirming measures that had been pronounced by government. He still went on to speak on us practicing safer hygiene measures, which are quite necessary, as even advised by epidemiologists, sure, to be able to curb, combat, and ultimately defeat
but Pule, that doesn't answer the question. The question is, what mistakes have been committed that the ANC can highlight from its perspective?
Well, Aldrin, I mean, listening to the president, he didn't go into specifics there. I can tell you now that we in the African National Congress have been looking at the work of the National Coronavirus Command Council closely, including sometimes when they would have pronounced on times, whether it's curfew, it's times for exercising and all of that, and felt that some of those areas, including sports that are not necessarily contact sports, mm-hmm, those things could actually be dealt with differently. E-commerce, for instance. I mean, there is more contact there. So such kind of activities, which are also economic enablers, could be areas that should be allowed to also work, especially during this period of time, mm-hmm, but also moving with caution to open, to ease these levels, so that by the time you move to the next level or you pronounce measures, so you don't pronounce measures today and do an update the following day. And, you know, we have had those kind of glitches in the past.
Okay.
You need to make sure that by the time you pronounce on measures or by the time you lay out regulations, mm-hmm, these regulations have been carefully thought. You announce them to the extent that people are able to practice them, yes, understanding that. So the message of government must be clear. Those who are ministers or part of the National Coronavirus Command Council, every time they speak, there should be singularity of message. There must be clarity in terms of what they are doing to South Africa.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That is the ANC spokesperson, Pule Mawethe, joining us in reaction to what the president has announced as we move ever so closer to level 3. Various issues that will be need to dealt with, excluding this issue around how do you decentralize the battle against COVID-19? Do you give municipalities more powers to try and curb the spread of the virus, considering that you have different provinces which have different numbers? For instance, the Northern Cape still having the lowest number of infections. Does the Northern Cape, for instance, does the Northern Cape have to be at level 3 if the president says that the country moves into level 3? Or can we say that in the Northern Cape at least, and the various districts in the Northern Cape can move into a level 2 or even a level 1 for that matter? Then you look at the Western Cape and the other end, and the Western Cape having the highest number of infections. What happens there? Does the Western Cape move up to a level 5 or does the Western Cape remain at level 4? But also let's look at the economic implications of what has been announced, and we'll now be speaking to economist Iraj. Good morning, Iraj. Rather good evening, Iraj, and welcome to African Perspective. In terms of the pressure that has been applied on the president to make an announcement at least and allowing more industries to go back to work, do you think that this could just cushion the blow as highlighted by the SARS commissioner?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reality is that the economy cannot continue under lockdown. It just kills activity, income, jobs, prospects, and confidence. Mm. So the president and the government more generally have got the responsibility to strike a balance between, as the president and everybody calls it, saving lives and and protecting livelihoods. Mm-hmm. And we can't have a situation where the lockdown is configured in a way that more people die as a result of lockdown as compared with the human toll that virus takes. So I think these are the real challenges. Governments are grappling with it, not just our government, globally. Yes. And I think the president has been honest with us to say, look, none of these governments know how to do it. They've never had it. They've never experienced it. There's no textbook for it. And they're just learning as they go along, make their mistakes, they correct it, and so on. I think as long as our government specifically listens to the citizens when mistakes are done and respond to it quickly enough, we will discover what is the right combination of, if you like, protecting human lives as well as preserving human livelihood.
Mm-hmm. What do you then make of this entire period? The announcement from the president comes in now, and he says that they will be taking submissions up until there is an announcement that this is indeed the date that we move into level 3. This particular process, and trying to mitigate also some of the confusion around which industries are allowed to operate and which are not, as we've seen under level 4.
Yeah, I think quite frankly, a lot of businesses assume that when, for example, we go to level 2 or level 1, they can just open and operate as usual. Yeah. That cannot be and should not be. My view is that we shouldn't put too much expectations and pressure on the government. Businesses should start announcing how they're going to protect their work environment, workers and customers, after everything is freed up. It can't be back to normal as we know it. Yeah. For example, mines may not be in the hottest spots as we define them in Durban and Cape Town and Gauteng. They are in the rural areas, but they can't operate the way they did before. Factories may not be in the hottest spots, or head offices may not be in the so-called geographic hottest spots. Yes. But they got to start applying their mind, announcing and collaborating and cooperating with government to come up with a plan of action that would enable the government to relax the situation.
Thank you so much for that, Iraj. Let's now move over on that particular note to Thabi Leoka, who is also an economist. And Thabi, good evening. Just listening into what Iraj has to say there, quite specifically speaking about the mining industry. And of course, under level 3, all mining can scale up to 100% employment. The big question is what the implication for me is, what the implication of this is in terms of the coffers and getting people back to work, but also whether Eskom has the power capacity to guarantee power supply.
So I don't think that all companies will be utilizing Eskom's power supply. So I think that Eskom should be able to cope. But you are right that there are companies that can operate at 100%, but a lot has changed between pre-COVID and now. And firstly, I think that what Iraj mentioned is that the demand for certain goods that we produce may have slowed down, and not just in South Africa, but globally. So mining production may actually be slow, because the demand may have slowed as a result of COVID and the impact that it's had in terms of, the global value chain, for instance.
And this lifting of the lockdown in terms of the job implications and what it would, the impact over there, listening into what the minister had to say around how jobs will be impacted, at least 11 million jobs in a worst case scenario, rather 6 million jobs in the worst case scenario that could be lost during this period.
That is true. So, we are not sure exactly how many jobs have been lost because Stats SA hasn't conducted its unemployment surveys. What typically happens is that field workers are sent out to conduct these surveys. And so because of the lockdown, field workers haven't been able to do so. So during the global financial crisis, we lost around 1 million jobs. Yeah. And we could easily have lost 3 million. But at the same time, I think that what we will see, and I think that's, it's a global trend, that once we start normalizing, we'll start seeing a pickup in employment. But there are going to be casualties. And because certain companies may not be able to come back And so unfortunately for those people, it could take longer for them to be absorbed by the labour market.
Well, and that's quite a bleak picture. Thank you so much, Tabilioka. And with that, let's conclude and speak to political analyst Prince Mashele. Good evening and welcome to African Perspective. Taking off from what Tabi has just mentioned around the issue around jobs, how do you see this have an impact on the man on the street?
Well, thank you, Aldrin, and good evening to viewers at home. We know that already South Africans are under pressure. There are too many companies that are under distress. So in other words, the challenge that is facing the government is to do two things. Number one is to save lives from COVID, but it's also to save lives from starvation. So what the president has done today is to signal that they are now opening up the economy because they want to save lives from starvation. And I think it's a welcome thing that he's doing. And what is important is that he wants to consult with South Africans widely. So, and he's throwing the ball now back to society, that we must now accept that going forward, it will be our responsibility to make sure that we protect ourselves. And I think that is a very strong message that we must all heed.
Mm-hmm. How then do you see the decentralized approach around various districts having their own, making their own decisions around whether they move into a level 3 or move into a level 4? How do you see that play out? And do you think that political parties, even those in the opposition, should be allowed space to monitor that?
Look, we live in a democracy, and government doesn't have monopoly over running the whole of society. In an open space like ours, we all need to have a say in terms of the direction that our society is taking. That means that political parties, given that they play in the political space, they have a right to have a say in terms of what should happen. But of course, there is a government at the national level, and the government must lead. So in other words, government must be able to monitor the rest of the country and determine what needs to be done across the country. But what is important is that there must be thorough consultations. It must not only be government that takes decisions without listening to South Africans as a whole.
Thank you so much for that, Prince Mashele there, political analyst. And as we have these conversations about moving into a new level, one thing that we shouldn't forget is that COVID-19 is deadly. It does kill. Tributes have been pouring in from many quarters, including former colleagues and from Parliament as well, for ENCA cameraman Lungile Tom, who died today after contracting the coronavirus. Condolences have been pouring out indeed. And I have to say that I've worked with him during my time at ENCA, and what a hard worker. And that's the sad reality, that we may find that many, many more will die from COVID-19. But as the president said, let's protect each other, let's take care of each other and continue to wash those hands and follow all precautionary measures. It's a good evening from me. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.